Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Open Our Eyes, a show which focuses on the inclusion of persons with disabilities in our society. I'm your host, Sean Calloway, and I'm joined by Mr. Lamont Wright.
Hello.
And he's also today, ladies and gentlemen, he's the co-host, but also he's the studio engineer for this evening, so he's doing double duty. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a first for Open Our Eyes. We have a politician in the house. And he's, from what I understand, a good one. He represents Ward 4, and like I said, he's a man about town, and he's about a lot of good things, so I'm looking forward to talking with him. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show Councilmember Brandon Todd. Councilman Todd, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
I am doing good. I'm so happy to have you here this evening.
Well, I'm just thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's get to it, Councilman. First of all, tell us about Councilman Todd and how you got into the councilman business.
Sure. Well, I have the privilege for the last 2.5 years to represent Ward 4 on the Council of the District of Columbia. And my path to the Ward 4 council seat began as a council staffer. I worked for then Ward 4 Councilmember Muriel Bowser in a number of capacities, from communications to research to constituent services, where I found my true love. And that's in really helping people to navigate district government and making sure that our agencies are delivering for people. So I represent a very diverse ward spanning from Chevy Chase to the west, Riggs Park to the east, Petworth to the south where I live, and then North Portal Estates and Shepherd Park and Brightwood to the absolute north. And so I have the privilege to represent black, white, rich, poor, young, old,
a nice mix,
and a very good mix of people. So it gives me, I think, a very unique perspective when I go down to City Hall, because I represent such a diverse population of people, and with all very, very different needs.
Are you a native of DC?
I'm a native Washingtonian, a third-generation Washingtonian. I went to Eastern High School. I went to Bowie State for undergrad, Trinity for grad school. So I'm a DC boy.
Oh, yes,
born
you
and
are.
bred,
All the way,
been
yeah.
here all my life. I'm never going to leave. Serving my city and serving every person in my ward, and certainly every person that I can across the city is what I go to City Hall to do every day.
What are some of the things that you feel that as a council member, not only just for your ward, but for the city in general, that when you first took over, you said, okay, I would like to really delve into increasing what, like in terms of...
So I've gone down to City Hall. My chief focus has been on government services, really making sure that no matter where you live, no matter what your income is, no matter what your social status is that you get good services from your government, whether you are going to the Office of Tax and Revenue, whether you are dealing with the Office on Disability Services, whether you're dealing with the Office on Aging. Now, I represent the second highest number of seniors, so I spend a considerable amount of time in my role, really digging deep to figure out how we can expand services in our government to support more seniors. Because, they're the reason that we have 800 new people moving to Washington, D.C. every month. They were here 50 years ago in the bad old days of D.C. when schools were spiraling out of control. The Congress took us over. And so I think it's incumbent upon our government, and certainly in my generation, to make sure that we do more to give back to senior citizens in D.C.
Do you feel that the services have improved and are good for seniors in the city now?
Absolutely. I think we have some of the most robust offerings for seniors in Washington, D.C. But like any city, I think governments were created and have always been very focused on those of us who have the least. But in a city where we have a very solid middle class that is struggling every day, especially our seniors, because they're living off of a retirement check or a Social Security check, and their funds are limited. And utility costs continue to rise. The cost of medication continues to rise. Food continues to increase, the cost of food. And so the more that our government can do to provide for those seniors, I think the better off we'll all be.
Now, Councilman Todd, and if I'm correct on this, a lot of council members have what they call, I guess, committees, or they kind of are the liaisons or head of overseeing certain agencies. So what, in regards to your capacity, what do you oversee?
Sure. I am the chair of the Committee on Government Operations, which oversees about 30 offices and agencies. Among them are the Office of the Chief Technology Officer, the office the mayor's office on Latino affairs, African affairs, African American affairs, veterans affairs, the office of the so a number of offices, about 30 offices and agencies are under my purview. I also serve on the council's committees on transportation and the environment, the council's committee on human services, and the council's committee on health. I think that me serving on those committees are very important because health outcomes for Washingtonians is very important. Human services outcomes for our people in our city are very important. I was just meeting with the director of human services, and we were talking about the homeless population today, and especially with nights like tonight where we think we're going to have precipitation, we have to make sure that we're housing some of our most vulnerable residents when we experience this cold weather. So I'm thrilled to serve on those 3 committees and chair the Government Operations Committee. It gives me a very good idea across the government at how to get things done quickly.
Wow, that's wow, man. I do you sleep?
I don't. Who needs sleep? No, I start my day. Usually, I'm out the door by 7:45, 8 o'clock, and I get home at 10 or 11 every night.
Wow.
But I enjoy serving the residents of Ward 4. I spend a lot of time in community meetings. I spend a lot of time in living rooms and alleys, really making sure that our government is turning out results for the residents.
As you've continued on as council member, what are some of the initiatives that you have going on right now in terms of what you want to see maybe improve or just be more progressive for citizens of DC?
Absolutely. I think with a government that serves nearly 700,000 people, we have an annual budget of about $14 billion, which is a huge budget for a city our size. But we're growing. Our tax base is increasing. Housing stock is increasing. I think we have more offerings across our government than ever before. But certainly we know that there are gaps. And I committed to the residents of Ward 4 that when I was elected, I would focus on where the gaps are in the laws when I look at what types of legislation I would introduce and champion before the council. One bill that I recently introduced last year is the Dyslexia and Other Reading Disabilities Screening and Prevention Pilot Program. And what that legislation would call for is for the state superintendent of education to develop, adopt, and provide for the implementation of the pilot program. We know so many times that young people have dyslexia, but they're not diagnosed until much later. And to the extent that our government can put resources in early detection so that we can best prepare our teachers, administrators, and our education leaders to service these young people, I think it's so critically important. And so that legislation is in the Committee on Education. A hearing has not been held, but I'm certainly very focused, very, very focused on that.
When you had something like that, Councilman, a constituent came to you in regards to how did you come about kind of championing this particular effort?
Sure. So I'm out in the community a lot, and I was talking to a resident who's having some challenges with her son. And the first thing she said to me was, Councilmember Todd, early detection would save all of us a lot of time and effort, and it would also make for better outcomes for her child. And so I went back to the office the next day, and I had my staff start to research what other states and cities are doing in this area. And we think that a pilot program for early screening is the best route to go. No, certainly, we still have a lot of challenges across a lot of areas, but I think one by one we can begin to tackle them.
You mentioned the homeless population a few minutes ago. In your point of view, where are we in terms of improving improving homelessness within the city?
I think that we are making great strides in improving homelessness. One challenge that our city has is that we are a right to shelter city. And so what that means is that any person who is experiencing homelessness, the city must provide them with shelter. Maryland and Virginia are not right to shelter states. So we get a lot of people from the neighboring jurisdictions who we have to house. You know, certainly our government wants to make sure that anybody experiencing homelessness, we provide them with shelter. That we're looking at ways to serve them more long term. I was really pleased to support the closing of DC General. And with the closing of DC General, and the mayor announced earlier this month that it will be closed by the end of the year, we will see 8 new family-style shelters in each ward. In my ward, we will have one at 5th and Kennedy, and at that location, we'll house about 50 families, and we will provide services across the spectrum for them. So job placement services, services for their young people. If there are any mental health needs, we would also provide them there, and really focused on getting them back into permanent and supportive housing.
Wow. When you took this job, and now being in the job for, you said 2.5 years?
2.5 years.
Okay. Is there one thing you said you just did not know, and then all of a sudden you just, I mean, there are a lot of things you learned being a council member, but what is one thing you've learned, like it's just something you just did not know about what's going on in regards to your constituents in Ward 4 or in the city in general?
I'll tell you, I had a really good training. I worked for a council member for 8 years, so I had a pretty good idea of what the job entailed, the hours, the challenges, the needs and wants across all 20 neighborhoods in Ward 4. But I'll tell you, you don't know what the job entails until you're in it, right? And so you know these things, but when it's you who has to make the tough decisions, when it's you who has to cast the votes on various issues that affect people's lives, it can be taxing sometimes. But I wake up every day with an idea that I'm going to go downtown and I'm going to work in the best interest of the 80,000 people that I represent, and certainly people all across the city. But you don't know what it takes until you're the one who takes the oath of office, and until the decisions that you make are yours to make. So I'll tell you, that was the biggest, you don't think about those things when you're a staffer. You're like, oh, go make the decision, member, right? And now you're the one making the decision. But you learn something new every single day. And I look at everything, every challenge as an opportunity. We're it's a great time to be an elected official in the world capital, despite what we're seeing on the federal level, the level of uncertainty. I hope that my leadership in the city brings, at least for the people I represent, a level of certainty in government, that government will work, that it does work, and we're going to work every day and double down and make sure that it's serving the residents as best we can.
Now, the reason why you're here is because of a woman to my left. She's a Ward 4 resident, and she just raves about Brandon Todd. Okay,
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Of course.
And so I'm sure you have a couple questions for him, Miss Libra. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, and I do appreciate you getting me in here. I will say I do apologize for my lateness. We had a young lady that is her first week doing Lyft, and we kind of toured Takoma Park this afternoon. So, but you have to be patient. It's her first little time to a young lady, so it's like, okay. But my question for you, I'll say Councilman Todd, is I have so many, because I get your newsletters, and it's just like, oh, wow, you see so much that you're doing, not that you want to do, but you have done, and I just look at it. And my first question to you is, when you decided to become a councilman, was it because you saw lack of leadership in our ward, or is it something that you always desired to do?
So I always knew that I would work in public service. Okay. I always knew that, I would either work on the federal level, in local government, but when our mayor became mayor, there was an opportunity to run for the Ward 4 council seat. And I thought to myself, who knows Ward 4 better? Who knows what the challenges are, what the opportunities are? Who knows how to get things done across any agency in our government? And who can best articulate exactly what Ward 4 residents want and deserve? And I asked those questions of myself, and I talked it over with some people. I talked it over with our now Mayor Mario Bowser, and she said, "Todd, I think you're the best person for the job. You should run." And I engaged in a 4-month door-to-door campaign where I knocked on 18,000 doors over a 4-month period. We had probably over a couple hundred events in that time frame where I spent time in people's living rooms. I was in churches. I was at daycare centers. You name it, I was there. And so that's how we got started, and we hit the ground running once I was sworn in, and we haven't looked back.
Fantastic. And that's very interesting that you said you started your campaign doing that. And as I read the newsletters, you're still doing, a lot of our politicians, they start off doing those type of things, but you're always in a community at some kind of event, and it doesn't have to be a big political event. It's like one event I saw where you had an event where you could bring coats for children who don't have coats. You're down, just doing all kinds of things. So, I could just go on and on, but I'm not.
He's a man among the people.
That's right.
That's what I think that's the key. Is that something that you definitely want to make sure that you continue to do? Making sure that you can't, stay local with your constituents. Go to their small businesses, things of that nature.
Absolutely. That is among some of the most important work I do. So I put the work I do in 2 buckets. Chiefly is touching my constituents, making sure that I hear directly from them what I should be doing, right? So staying at community meetings. I have office hours in the ward. I'm going to have them right in Takoma, DC at the library on February the 12th at 6:30 p.m. Sitting in people's living rooms, going to churches, having people come to my office and meet with me, but also is fighting for resources in the budget, making sure that we're investing in our schools and our senior centers, making sure that we're looking across every single agency and figuring out where the gaps are. So yes, pressing the flesh, making sure that I'm available to my constituents. When I ran for office, I said, I'm not going to be that guy that only shows up when I want your vote. I'm going to be that guy that shows up when you are having a challenge in your life, when the government is not being responsive, just to really make sure that we're working hard. And we have a very high bar in my office. When I hire new staff, I tell them, look, I know you're signing up to be a communications person, but it's a whole lot more to that, right? I know you're signing up to work on legislation, but part of your job is going to be to do constituent services, because I think it's important, in order for you to write laws for the people I represent, you have to know what their challenges are. And so that means engaging with them on a constituent services level. So is very important to me. There's nothing more important than being available for my constituents.
Councilman, let me be kind of candid here. Oftentimes when I've talked to, not even talk with politicians, because this is really the first opportunity that I've had a face-to-face with a council member. Your knowledge on persons with disabilities, right? Is it vast? Is it sort of minimal? Is it something you're trying to learn? I know when this young lady to my left contacted you about the National Federation of the Blind, you was on it. You was ready to support and things that we want to, not we, but the Federation of the Blind and other blind or disabled organizations wanted to do. So what's your, knowledge on persons with disabilities?
I would say I've learned a lot, especially being on the Committee on Human Services. So in the Health Committee, having oversight over Department of Disability Services, Department of Human Services, a number of our agencies that serve people with disabilities. I'll tell you right now, Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind is looking at my Ward 4 Council's website, BrandonToddWard4.com, to see how user-friendly it is for people that have that are vision impaired. So that's something that's important, that no matter what challenges you have, what disabilities you have, that you're able to know what we're doing in Ward 4. So that's something that we're undergoing right now. So they are assessing my website, and then they
make
will
sure
come
you're
back.
compliant.
Yes,
That's right.
and they'll come back to me with a set of recommendations. I'm sure we're going to have to adjust some things, and we'll work with them to get that done. I've learned, throughout the budget process, what some of the challenges are for people in our community with disabilities. I know transportation, adequate health care options that service all of their needs. And so I learn every day. And so when people contact me with challenges or issues, I try to be responsive and figure out what I don't know. How can I get up to speed on it, and how can we support what we're doing, what you're doing.
Matter of fact, you mentioned Office on Disability Services in regards to, because again, you deal with the sort of the government operations,
Yes,
and what have you. Do you deal with in terms of sort of service delivery, how fast consumers are receiving services? Is that the operations part, or how does that work?
So government operations, we look at government efficiencies across the entire government. So I have in my office, in my committee, oversight of the city administrator and the executive office of the mayor. So by default, it gives me oversight over everything in our government. But through my membership on the Committee on Human Services is where we really dig down into some of the issues that support some of our city's disabled residents. And I deal with these things usually on a individual basis when people will email or call my office. Councilmember Todd, we're having a challenge with the Office of Disability Services. We're having a challenge with the Office of Behavioral Health. We need you to reach out. We need you to cut through the red tape. We're not getting services. Some people just email and say the services are great. Or some people say, these are the gaps, and I need your help in figuring out how we address them, how we fill them. And that's when I will take legislative action, or I will reach out to the agency and figure out, is it a policy change that we need? Is it a legislative change that we need? Do we just need more funding here? And so we're entering the time of the year at the council where we'll start to look at oversight. So I will be looking at all of these agencies, and then we'll move into the budget season where we'll figure out, do we need more resources here? What do we need to bolster? What should we be looking at? How do we serve more people?
Well, I have I have 1,000 questions, but one of the things that I did see in your newsletter is you made a commitment to try to fix any broken lights or street lights and just anything in our area in Ward 4 that could just enhance Ward 4's overall not just appearance, but just help the constituents to feel more safe. Are there any other issues or things that you would really like to do for Ward 4 that hasn't been done yet?
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a great question. So as you said, my staff and I have spent, I think the last about 45 days, literally going block by block and assessing broken street lights, right? People think, a street light out that's no big deal, but that can really improve public safety. As a city that's growing, we want to make sure that our street lights are all working, they're all operable. And so we've reported hundreds of street lights out across our ward to make sure that people feel safe, that the streets are illuminated. But we'll continue to focus on Kennedy Street and 14th Street. We'll have a new Main Street designation. And what that does is it brings resources from the government to support the businesses that are there, but it also looks at how we can attract more businesses to those corridors. So if you've lived in DC, Kennedy Street has been a challenge for many years, right?
Yes.
I hear the but I'll tell you, over the last 10 years, we have seen so much progress on Kennedy Street.
Yes.
When I was a staffer in the Ward 4 Council office, we worked and got through the council a Kennedy Street revitalization plan. Since I've been elected, we've invested $13 million in Kennedy Street streetscape improvements, which puts up new lights, repaves the roads, makes all of the sidewalks and crosswalks ADA compliant. And so we have invested heavily in Kennedy Street, and we'll continue to do that. We're looking at Georgia Avenue, ways that we can invest in Georgia Avenue, which also, if you've been around for a long time, you know that Georgia Avenue has been a challenge. But let me tell you, we're seeing so much investment and so much interest in Georgia Avenue and Kennedy Street. And you know, Walter Reed, that's really the belle of the ball for economic development. We're going to see 66 acres of redevelopment that'll happen there. Everything from retail to senior affordable housing to market rate senior housing to an an outdoor swimming pool. We're going to see a lot at Walter Reed. It's going to be fantastic. And everybody from every income will have an opportunity to live there.
Well, I will say for Georgia Avenue, you've done great things because I personally live on Georgia Avenue, and I like to go to a certain pizza place that's around there, Lido's. But it was a challenge getting across the street because it was so, the potholes and everything. Now, I do like that you have the lights that can talk to you, so that's a fantastic thing with a person with a disability, but you have done great things for Georgia Avenue and fixing it so it can be safe.
And we just repaved that part of Upper Georgia Avenue
I know.
last year.
Thank you.
And let me tell you, Lido's, I was there on Friday. I had my favorite. I always get a small pepperoni pizza, and a little side salad to try to balance all of that. I really like to add wings with it, but I didn't have the wings on Friday. So, Lido's Pizza on Upper Georgia Avenue is fantastic.
It sure is.
And they're great Ward 4 residents who own it, and they employ lots of Ward 4 residents. So we're really lucky to have Lido's Pizza there.
Congressman, we have a little group of people that listen regularly, and one of them is Aunt Angel. And Aunt Angel had a question regarding the shelter. She was saying when the shelter reopens, will it be adequate security? Because, of course, that's one of the pitfalls of people being hesitant about utilizing the shelter.
Absolutely. So the family shelters that we will have will be very secure. There'll be security employees there every day, 24 hours a day. Of course, there'll be staff at the shelters 24 hours a day. I think the biggest challenge that we've had at DC General, and I'm so glad that we're able to close DC General. I'm so glad that our mayor, this mayor that we have now, made that a priority from day one. And now we're going to see that place closed down. But security is always an issue, especially at DC General. But I think with the smaller shelter model, we can have very focused and intentional resources at each and every location. Whereas at DC General, we house probably around 400 people there. So you can imagine trying to keep secure 400 people, trying to adequately feed and provide services to 400 people. Whereas with the smaller shelter model, we'll have about 100 people. And so we can be very, very intentional about providing resources and utilizing government agencies at their highest potential. So we'll be very focused when people enter into one of the family shelters that we'll have in all 8 wards. We'll be very focused on figuring out how we get them into permanent supportive housing, but also how we get them into job training if they need it, to get them employed if they aren't employed, if their children need resources to make school days go better. We're gonna figure out how we get them the resources. So I'm just so delighted that I'm a part of a council and working with the mayor that's made this a big priority.
Now, when you do open these shelters, are you going to ensure that they are able to house persons with disabilities? Because a lot of shelters, I've had people that are visually impaired turned away from shelters because they say, we don't know, we can't help you, or a person in a wheelchair. Are you going to ensure that in the plan there are resources or I would say availability for persons with disabilities to be able to adequately into your shelter.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad we're having this conversation because if it's not already a part of the plan, which I expect that it would be, I'm going to make sure that I talk with the Director of Human Services and talk to the Deputy Mayor for Human Services to make sure that we're thinking about how we service our residents with disabilities, because we shouldn't turn anybody away. Certainly anybody with a disability, you come to the government for help, and it is our job to support and help. So I will make sure I have that conversation. I'm sure it's a part of the plan, but we're going to double down and make sure that it is a part of the plan.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
That's why I like Brandon
Absolutely.
Todd. Not endorsing, just saying liking.
Yeah, that's right.
Can't endorse.
Yeah, that's right. I got a question for you, Councilman. Now, when it comes to economic development within your ward, and you talk about business development, do you have someone on your staff that chiefly deals with business development, or is that something you do in conjunction with the council member who oversees business operations, sort of?
I think I feel so strongly about economic development and the development of small local businesses that I have someone on my staff, my deputy chief of staff, who half of her job is to focus on our small businesses. So when I was elected, I decided that I would have 12 advisory committees that advise me on policies, that advise me on community initiatives and legislative initiatives. And one of them is a small business advisory committee made up of Ward 4 small business owners. And that group of people meets every other month. And their job is to let me know what the challenges are, what government programs we have that are working and which ones aren't working, and where we need to invest more. Maybe there's a program we don't need anymore, right? And so that group of people really helps me to focus on that. But Dolly Turner, who's my deputy chief of staff, half of her job is to focus on small businesses, what their challenges are. You know, people call my office and say, hey, I'm thinking about opening a small business on Kennedy Street. Now, I call myself the chief recruiter of Ward 4. I'm always trying to get people to move to my ward, residents, as well as businesses. And so we focus a lot on making sure that our government is supporting small businesses.
Outstanding. And Council, let me ask you this. This is sort of a trivia question for myself.
Oh, here we go.
No. This is something I need to know that you may know. Is Ward 4 the largest ward in the city? Because I really don't know.
So we do have a couple wards that are growing a little bit faster as it relates to population. But as I said earlier, my ward encompasses a whole lot of Rock Creek Park. Not many wards go west of Rock Creek Park, and then I go as far as the east as Riggs Road and South Dakota Avenue. So it's certainly the most diverse ward in the district of There's no ward that can beat us on diversity. Most of my colleagues, I have the opportunity to represent so many different types of people. And let me tell you, with a lot of different needs and desires and wants. And so it gives me an amazing perspective when I'm going down to City Hall and looking at proposals that come before the council, when I'm looking at our budgets and what the needs are, because I have to fight for everybody, not just one type of people or persons, but I have to fight for everybody. So it gives me a unique perspective.
Now, with all of the things that we're hearing in the news about schools and things, how do you keep up with the different schools, the charter schools and things of that nature in Ward 4? What is your outlook on those issues?
So we're really fortunate in Ward 4. We have 38 fantastic public schools. Half and half are about half are public charter schools, and then the other half are traditional public schools. I think we're very lucky in Ward 4. We really have some of the best schools in the District of Columbia. We're lucky as a city that our public charter sector as well as our traditional public school sector are growing together very nicely. I think that people should have choice, and we want to make sure that we're providing them with a high quality choice. One thing that was very important to me right after I was elected, I visited within the first 6 months of being the council member every single public school in my ward, because I wanted to very clearly know what the challenges were at the schools, what types of resources I should be fighting for. Should I be fighting for a full modernization? Should I be fighting for books? Should I be fighting for more teachers, more after-school course offerings and curriculum? And so that was very important for me. I stay very engaged with the school community. I attend as often as I can parent-teacher organization meetings because, they have the boots on the ground in the schools and they know what the needs are. But we're really fortunate in Ward 4. We have some great school options, whether they're traditional schools, whether they're public charter schools.
I like that because so often the focus is on charter schools and not public schools. And I think it should be on both.
Sure. And, I represent a lot of people who have kids at both, right, in the same household. They'll say, my daughter goes to the neighborhood traditional DCPS school and my other child attends a public charter school. So people, they just want good options.
Council, I actually, people don't know this. I actually attended Brightwood.
Okay.
Years ago. I went there K through third grade. Is that still a public or is it a charter school?
No,
now?
Brightwood is a public school.
Right.
We now call it Brightwood Education Campus. It goes up to the 8th grade.
Oh, wonderful.
And I was there for Career Day last year, and let me tell you, they're bursting at the seams. They have a great principal. Lots of kids are there. I did Career Day with, I think, maybe 1st through 3rd and then 3rd through 6th. And let me tell you, those scholars are bright. The future is bright, let me tell you. We really have some dedicated teachers and dedicated school administrators that are really committed to making sure that our students have everything they need.
That's outstanding. That is outstanding. When it comes to the children, and I want to talk more about the young adults, do you and summer jobs, and I know that was a big initiative years ago with Marion Barry, of course, and I know Mayor Bowser is very passionate about students and teenagers getting jobs. And do you, in your office, or do you kind of work hard to make sure that these teenagers are working or employed during the summer?
Absolutely. I think it's maybe more important now than ever that we have a robust summer youth employment program that serves kids from the age 14 all the way to 24. Because what we're seeing in our city is a city that is growing fast and quickly becoming a city of the haves and the have-nots. And so it's the government's job to make sure that we are providing our young people with meaningful work experience and the opportunity to make money. Now, I always host at least 2 summer youth employment students in my office. Last year, I think I even had 4 at one time. But I think it's important that we provide young people with an opportunity to see how government works, but to have a meaningful experience while also making money. I was happy to support the mayor's proposal to serve 22 to 24-year-olds. Now, all of my colleagues don't think that that's an important demographic to serve, but I know that we have to make sure that we're touching as many people that we can, especially in that 22 to 24 year old category, is so important. And I know that we even have some workforce initiatives that will provide employment for people in that age range all year round. So it's so important.
That's fantastic because if you think about it, 22 to 24, you're not a teenager anymore, but you're not old, as they would say, yet, grown.
Just
So
got
that's
your
a very,
feet under you.
very, I like that. I
Yeah,
like that
no, it's
age.
important. It's important.
Councilman, because I know you kind of limited on time, but
I'm having a good time.
You having a good time?
I'm having a good time.
Great.
he's limited on time, but he's having a good time. But I want to get. Oftentimes, when we have guests in here, we want to know about the guests themselves. Because we've been talking politics and some of the wonderful things you've done for Ward 4 in the city. But Brandon Todd himself, what is some of the things you like to do?
Well, when I'm not working, which is all the time,
What is that?
I work 16 hours a day, but when I do get the opportunity to just kick back and relax, I like to sit on the couch and watch TV, but I don't get the chance to do it very often, or read a book. I haven't done that very often lately either. I spend a lot of time with my mother and grandmother. I'm fortunate enough that they both live in Washington, D.C., and so I spend a considerable amount of time when I can with them. But, my job is my passion. And so, I don't mind working on Sundays. Yesterday I had 3 events. One was a potluck with residents. One was a scholarship banquet, and the other was a meeting with some constituents. So I think it's important, as long as I'm the Ward 4 council member, I belong to the people.
That's good.
So
It's not work when you love it.
it's not work when you love it. No, it's not work.
Now, how does Brandon Todd's mom feel about him? And what's her name?
Well, my mother, Karen, is so proud of the work that I'm doing and that we're getting accomplished for Ward 4 residents. For the first, I would say 4 or 5 months I was in office, she went everywhere with me to the point where I would go places. They were like, "Where's your mom?"
Right.
I'm like, well, I'm here. And they're like, yeah, but we want to see your mom. Where's your mom? No, she's great and super supportive. She and my grandmother both. I couldn't do it without them.
Fantastic.
Couldn't do it without them.
Did anyone tell you don't run?
My grandmother actually. So my mother was all in, but my grandmother said, I don't want all that pressure on you. You need just, go work in the government. You don't need to work 17 hours a day. And I often tell her, I remind her, you didn't want me to run at first, but she's happy that I did and that I pursued my passion. But she was just thinking about me.
Yeah, that's your baby.
No,
You're
that's
the
right.
councilman, but that's Brandon.
That's right.
Brandon.
So no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And let's, it'd be safe to say that Mayor Bowser is sort of like a mentor to you in a sense because you worked in her office. Do you ever? I mean, this is just a real question.
Sure.
Have you ever butt heads on an issue?
Absolutely. Well, the mayor, she's a very good friend, and she is my mentor, and we share a lot of the same priorities. It's amazing, actually, sometimes, when things come before the council or challenges that we're seeing on the federal level, our thought processes are the same. But we've had the pleasure to work together now for a decade. That's a long time. 8 years in the Ward 4 council office. Now 3 years she being mayor and 2.5 me being the Ward 4 council member. But of course, you don't agree with everybody on everything, right? Even some of your closest allies. But I know that just like I do, she has the best interests of the residents at hand, and we always figure out how to work together and get things done for the people, which is important. Just like with my colleagues, we don't always agree, at the council, but we always figure it out and try and do what we think is best for the residents.
Right. Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you got Adrian Finty was a Ward 4 councilman, right? Wasn't he?
Yes, he was the Ward 4 council member.
Yeah, after him was Muriel Bowser.
Muriel Bowser was the Ward 4 council member.
Now, after Muriel Bowser, years down the line, can we even envision Mayor Todd? Or no?
Well, I'm squarely focused on being the best Ward 4 council
Great
member I can be.
answer.
That's right.
Great
That's the politician answer. I love it.
He went straight. His face went straight. I am strictly
for the people.
Yes,
That's right.
but
That's right.
fantastic.
And you done an outstanding job for your people. And
Yes,
like I said, I was very excited that you were coming in. Like I said, I was telling you off air that I met you at an event hosted by Dr. Is it Mary Ivy?
Yes, Dr. Mary Ivy. Yes.
And you spoke at that event, and of course, as like a politician, you had to roll out because you had other things to do, serving your constituents. But I'm very impressed on the things you've done and some of the. But like I said, I said when Libra made a comment, I said you're a man of the people, and you really are. I think you take pride in being a man of the people, don't you?
I do, absolutely, absolutely, I do. And we've come a long way in our city, but we have a lot of work to do, and we need people just like yourselves, making sure that we know what the priorities are, making sure we know what's working and what's not working, and where we can make improvements to help people and serve people better. So I'm always looking at how we do even more, and how we serve more residents.
I think what impressed me just now too, council member, is that when you had mentioned the term, we have the have and the have-nots. Now, there are a lot of people who don't want to recognize the have-nots at all. And you've worked hard to recognize those who may not have as much as the haves.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yes, and we have to. It's our job
Right.
as a government to make sure that we're using our resources to support the people who need it the most. And I think that in our city, we're really seeing people who are squarely in the middle class who are suffering. And governments have not always been as have not always supported the people right in the middle, right? There was a time where if you lived in Washington and you made 65, maybe 70,000, you could live really well. Now, it's a challenge. And so it's incumbent upon our government to step up and figure out how we create more workforce housing even faster than we are, but we've put more money out on the street. There was a Washington Post article that said the current administration, the Bowser administration, has put out more affordable housing dollars than any in recent history. And so I know that the administration is totally committed and the council is, but we have to do more. We have to do more fast because there's so many Washingtonians who are squarely in the middle who are really, really suffering.
Wow. If someone wants to reach Councilman Todd, how do they do so?
Yep, they can send me an email to btodd@dccouncil.us or call my office at 202-724-8052. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and so you can reach me through any of those social media outlets. But call my office, send me an email. I'm attached to my iPhone, so I respond to emails at 2 in the morning, 6 in the morning, 10 in the morning, 11 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon. I'm always checking emails. So send me an email, call my office if there's something I can do, an idea that you have. Like I said, we're coming up on oversight and budget season, and so this is a really important time for residents to express what their priorities are.
Outstanding. Well, as a resident of District of Columbia, we're blessed to have you, my friend.
Thank
Yes,
you.
yes.
And you are welcome here anytime.
All right.
So
Well,
just call us, let us know.
I will let you know. Well, I'll have to come back on. Maybe we'll have to do it a few times a year.
Oh, not a
Yes.
problem.
All
Not
right.
a problem. We would love that. We would
do it.
love that. And by the way, you had one of your staffers here. What is his name?
Joshua Fleetman. So Joshua is my director of communications. So he works really hard on that wonderful Ward 4 weekly newsletter we send out every week.
That's you. I love that newsletter.
Joshua.
So
Where is Joshua?
I tell everybody I have the hardest working council staff in the Wilson building. And I'll just share this quick story before we wrap up. So I was hiring about a year and a half ago someone to work on legislative director. A young lady who's now my legislative director, she says, Mr. Todd, everybody in the building says that you work your staff really hard. And, that was kind of, I thought to myself before I came for this interview, do I want to work for the hardest working council member in the building? And she, what she said? Yes. Because that is what public service is all about. So when I hire people, I tell them, look, I know you're signing up for one job, but it's the other duties as assigned. It could be someone calling the office who needs support, and you know what? You may have to go to their house and help them. But that's the kind of service that we try to provide in my office. That's what I think it's all about. Is really serving the people that you represent.
Outstanding.
And our listeners are so engaged, they probably didn't get a chance to stumble over and grab a pencil or pen. So if you could just give that name, number, email out again.
Absolutely. So my email is btodd@dccouncil.us, and my telephone number is 202-724-8052, and that's Brandon Todd, and I'm the Ward 4 council member.
And he's the first guest we've had, ladies and gentlemen, because Councilman, we always play music in the middle of a half hour, but we went through this whole.
All right.
Usually we'll tell you, let's just take a break.
Yeah, let's
we'll come back after the song and get back to. We didn't even have time to get the
All
song
right.
going because
So-
it was just riveting, engaging conversation.
Wonderful, man.
Yes,
Wonderful.
yes,
Well, thanks again, Councilman,
Yes.
for coming in, and it was an honor and pleasure having you here.
Yes,
No,
we
thank
do
you all for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
Wonderful.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for having me.
All right, you take care.
Thank
All right,
you.
take care.